Let's see what this is like. Well, it hasn't quite gone to concrete. It's like a thick sticky wax. And this would provide all that stiffness, that extra drag on the focus scale ring. Trying to get the focus helical to move inside this sticky mess. Right, that's not the worst example by any means. Let's get this cleaned off. Here I'm just using naphtha because this grease is relatively soft, and the naphtha is cleaning it away quite well. Sometimes you need to use more aggressive thinners, particularly if the stuff is really hardened up. I think that what happens with the grease is that over time the more volatile components just vaporise off, go and settle somewhere else, and you're just left with the base. That looks a lot happier. Once more and then we'll be done. It's hard to get cleaned in behind the two posts there. So I'm just squashing a cotton bud out very, very flat so I can hopefully wipe it behind there. Yeah, sort of did. That should be good. That's that nasty piece of the job done. I'll just wipe my take-up spool while I'm here. Now I'm wiping this is naphtha, and I'm just giving that a quick wipe to remove the grease from that. You wouldn't want to use a more aggressive solvent than naphtha on that plastic. It would be likely to misbehave and go all soft and sticky. I'm ready to get my components back from the ultrasonic cleaner and start putting the body components together. I'll start putting this camera body back together. So first I'll start by just putting a little bit of molybdenum paste on this post that the guide for the shutter release runs on. Taking the struts, which I've now got straightened up to my satisfaction, I'll just put some synthetic grease in the two slots at the back. I don't put them on the front ones because it'll only end up coming off in my fingers while I'm assembling things. I'll rub a little bit of molybdenum paste on this post that the shutter release runs on. And you don't need much, you just leave a dirty mark, it's enough molybdenum paste. And those struts can go back in. So, the first thing to go in is the return spring for the shutter release. Then we want the transfer shaft for the shutter cocking action, which goes in the body right here. And there's a bracket that holds that in place, which needs to sit in place there. And when that's done, I can get the struts back into position. So making sure I've got this the right way round, which is that way. I'm going to hook that onto that post and swing this into the body without disturbing the bracket that holds that transfer shaft in place. That went suspiciously smoothly. I'm checking the 4 screws that I've got to hold that struts in place, because the ugliest one goes under the leather and it should have traces of adhesive still on it. And to tell the truth, they've cleaned up so well in the ultrasonic cleaner that I can hardly tell. So I'll put 1 screw in the top here to hold this in place. The screw should go right through the bracket. I'm not seeing the hole. Is that bracket moved over? I think my bracket might have moved across. I'll just see if I can... No, I can see what it is. Yeah, my struts had moved across. There's the hole through the bracket, through the struts. Get that screw in place to hold it. That's great. The 2 screws in the film cassette well can go in place. And these screws I'm only doing up very lightly, because I may need to wriggle things about to get the last screw in position in the base of the camera. And the last screw before that goes in is a spacer washer that goes in between the struts and the body. I'll pull those struts out into the open position so I can get in behind there easily, in the same relative position as the bracket at the top of the camera. So I'll see if I can drop that into position. That's about right. Flip my leather out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. And get that screw in place. I've got my 4 screws in place. The bracket is in place at the top. The space is in place at the bottom. I can tighten up those 4 screws. And that's my struts in place. And they click nicely into position. I'll take the focus mount and fit that in place. I'll just hold that loosely in there between my fingers. That's fine. And now I'll find the appropriate screws for that. One more, it should be here somewhere. All my screws are just loose in the parts container because all the parts have been cleaned together. Right, that's the 4 screws that hold that in place. Now I'll just do those 4 screws up tight. They were loose when we started. Right, that's good. There are 4 screws that go through the focus mount and hold the bellows on at the back of the front standard, so I'll get those 4 screws in position. One is hiding, no, there it is. They're all done up, now I can tighten them. Alright, so if I extend the front of the camera, I'll pull that curtain, the contrast ratio has just blown out. I'll pull the curtain across, a little bit sunny. So our bellows are now fixed to the front standard. Front standard is all fixed in place. Now the transfer shaft that brings the action of the cocking rack through to the front of the camera. We've got the back half of the transfer shaft in place, of course. The front half is where hiding. Hang on, there it is. To make sure there's no moisture in there. Put a little bit of grease on that. Drop that into position and make sure it couples with the shaft. Here it is, it's coupled. Here's the cover. And this is held in place with 2 chrome screws. That cover's not sitting correctly. What's wrong here? That's better. And here's the other screw. This screw is pretty much hidden out of sight, so if you've managed to scar the screws up, one of the screws up, getting them loose, put the ugly screw down here and the better looking screw at the top position where it'll be seen, not the other way around. Okay, so that's that part fine. You can see how the transfer shaft runs through the centre there. Just checking those struts are pulling up and locking in position correctly, because they didn't originally, of course. No, that's good. So, the focus helical, the inner and outer. I'll screw these together. Now I've got to get these aligned in the correct position by my marks. There were 3 marks there that somebody had put there previously, so I'll get those aligned correctly. This is a multi-start thread, of course. No, at least one clicked the wrong way there. Am I there yet? No. Where is my marks? Oh, the way around there. out there. One more. Right, there I have it. So the front surfaces of the inner and outer are level and the alignment marks are aligned. So I know that that was the correct position. That I have that in the right orientation, or the multi-start threads are started in the right place. I'm just run a bit of naphtha in the thread between these two components and just work them backwards and forwards just to rub off any high spots there might be on there. Sometimes you're left with a little bit of roughness. That's running smooth. Now this, I'm just going to check the action of this. Now I put alignment marks 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top, so I know it goes this way in. I'm just checking how this moves in the mount because it was very stiff previously, and I expect that it'll be nice and smooth now, unless there's some sort of problem. Oh, that's nice and smooth in its action. So that can come out, and I'll apply some helical grease and then fit all this in place. Right, so I'll apply some helical grease, and normally I put a smear in about 5 places around the outside, like that, and work that in. Check that it's moving smoothly, that all appears good. Put some on this surface, and usually just a quick wipe on the 2 points, the 2 slots that run on the guide posts. Now I've got to put this in the right way up. I know my double mark was at the bottom, so that's there. The retainer plate obviously bears on that outer helical, and so I need to put a little bit of grease on that retainer plate where it will bear on that outer helical, so that that will run smoothly. It doesn't need much. The retainer plate drops into place there, and at that point I need to find the screws. There are 6 countersunk head screws that hold this in position. They are the same size screws as hold the focus scale ring to the outer helical. If some of your screws are a little bit, the heads on them are a bit damaged, typically they got damaged when the focus scale ring was forced out of position. Put the damaged screw heads in this position and keep 4 good screws to hold the focus scale ring in position. I don't think I've got any damaged screws in this particular camera because the focus scale ring had not shifted on the helical. That's my 6 screws. They're all in place. I'll go around and tighten them. They just need to be nipped up tight. Don't go crazy. All these screws are small. You will strip them, or snap the heads off them, or do something else awful if you force things. So far so good. Now the focus scale ring. Now I put my alignment mark, a single alignment mark at the top and 2 alignment marks at the bottom, so those marks are all lined up nicely now. And I want 4 more of the small countersunk head screws. Now these screws, you need to do them up very lightly. You do not need to crank these things up hard. If you do these screws up hard, all that you'll do is you will distort the outer helical so that the focus is unusually stiff. Let's pop that to one side, that's the wrong screw. That's the other wrong screw. I'm down to the last screw I need here. There it is. So these 4 screws, make sure your alignment marks are good, then just nip these screws up very lightly. Check that the focus is smooth. That action's great. That's no problem there. And our bracket, this is the lever that operates the rangefinder. I'll get that into position. There are 2 very small screws that hold this in position on the inner helical. It's one of them. There's the other. When they're both in position, you can tighten them up. At the top, there's the guide post screw that pulls the arm of the rangefinder forward. Goes in here. It's the wrong screwdriver, but it'll do. You can see that that post moves as I move the focus. You'll see that that moves in and out. What's happening here? That's better. Something's not moving right here. What's going on? Oh, that's pushed back too far. That tells me that this arm is bent here. Right. Okay, so I'll take that back out. Basically what's happening is that as we approach the infinity position, this screw is being pushed back into the curve. It should be working in the straight forward and backwards here. That tells me that things are bent. In fact, this connection at this point is pushed back. Now, how would it get like that? Well, one good way to make it get like that is if the rangefinder is jammed or a screw, loose screw, falls into the track here and blocks it, and you force the focus scale ring, you effectively stretch out this piece. Looking at this ring now, you can see that this front end here is swept right back. That should all be in a flat plane. So I will have to straighten that up. Right, another pair of pliers. I'll just hold the bracket with this pair of pliers and swing this piece forward and see if I've got it straight. Not yet. I've moved it quite a bit too. More still. That's better. And this is no longer at right angles here, so I've got to bend that little tab down slightly. That's probably sufficient. Now let's see how we get on. Pop that back in place. If that condition where that lever was effectively too far back, if that's slight and you don't notice it, you will have a great deal of trouble getting correct alignment of your rangefinder at the infinity end of its range and at its close-up end of the range. Because at the infinity end of the range, this arm is pushed back too far and it's moving left along that track, which means it contacts the rangefinder in the wrong position. Do that screw up and check what's happening. Yeah, now I've got smooth movement through to the infinity end of the scale. This is just tracking down that track forward and aft nice and smoothly. Once the door's on here, it stiffens this action up so that you don't get any wobble in it. Well, that's good. That really just requires the door to be put on next. Now here, this tab in particular is bent. It sweeps in towards the end. So I'll just see if I can straighten that up. That's better. Its mate's okay. I'm looking at the sweep of them. If they push in too far, they'll be too tight. If they don't push in far enough, there'll be wobble in the door. I think that's about right. I'm just going to try that temporarily on the camera, see how it goes. Yeah, that feels all right. I've got to find some washers to go on there, the paper washers. But otherwise, that feels good. Alright, let's take that off again and find some paper washers. Alright, I'll just put a smear of grease on the pins, which will serve to hold my paper washers in place while I'm getting everything set up. I'll put a smear of grease in the slots, top and bottom, where this door fits. And hook that door into position. Get the top one in the position, stretch the door out and let the bottom one fall into place. Now I want my hinge pins. Some cameras will have a washer on the door at the hinge position if there's any play in the door. This one didn't seem to have a washer. That doesn't mean it shouldn't have had a washer. This means that it didn't have one. Just checking the action of that door. And there is a bit of play there, so I'm going to fit a washer in between the door and the body at that point to take up that slop. Otherwise you end up with inconsistent action. Sometimes of the focus, but more commonly you end up with inconsistent action of the shutter release. I'll try this washer, see if that does the job for me. If it's still a bit of rattle there, I'll put a thicker washer in there. Oh, there's still quite an obvious rattle there, so I will put a washer in, and since I've got the camera this way up, I'll put it in at the top of the camera, and I'll need to find a washer. Right, let's try sliding some washers in there. I think that's it. Get the screw in place, and then I'll check that the washers didn't get displaced. That looks good, and there's no slop there now. No slop in the door, and the focus mechanism works smoothly right through to the infinity position. Right, well, I think that part's done. If I put some film advance components back into the body now, then I can glue that leather back down on the base so that it's not flapping and therefore won't be prone to damage.